is here. Let's go ahead and I'll call this meeting to order at 6:01 on October 26th. Would you like to take roll call for us, Ada?
Yes, Mr. President, Mr. Nielsen,
Here.
Mrs. Contreras, Mr. Rader,
Here.
Mrs. Reyes. Here. Mrs. Sashanak.
Here.
Thank you. If you'd all like to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I would appreciate it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'd now like to have just a moment of silence. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda tonight is just the governing board annual board meeting goals. Discussion on that. So if we can bring that up, or we'll just like to review those 4 goals, and then there's some additional things that Dr. Freeman has presented to us later this year. So I believe we've all reviewed these a number of times, but just to bring them back to our mind, we have the 4 goals that were set previously. The first one is on a biannual basis, not later than October 30th, which is just around the corner. We will conduct a self-evaluation. That was done, and we have the results for that available
Tonight.
Very good. We'll review those a little bit later this evening. On an annual basis, each board member will or shall pursue some professional development and regional collaboration opportunities by participating in a minimum of 2 emerging trends, issues, or policy solutions. I believe Ada has got all of those lined up for us as to what they are and who has attended those. She's done a good job of keeping track of us.
Is this data attached?
I don't know if there's any discussion on that. And then our third goal, on a quarterly basis, the board shall hold a study session. I believe this is our quarterly one, and the 4th one for the year, so that one's in line. And then the 4th one was on a quarterly basis. Board members shall participate in addition to board meetings, a minimum of 2 school district events and interactive communications, building with rapport with teachers, staff, and a community. And I believe we've done fairly well on that one. I don't know if you'd like to review any of that material this evening, or.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I don't have anything to add. I think they're still relevant at this time.
Thank you. Amy, anything you'd like to say?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. We appreciate all that you've done too to participate and keep us active and going in all of this. Well, all right. Dr. Freeman, the next item would be for you to review that monitoring report with us.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As President and I have talked about the work that the staff's doing and dealing with the things that are happening in the district, the fact that we were in remote learning or hiatus so much of last year, we suspended the goals report. We have taken a different approach and definitely want to get feedback from the board on that tonight to the monitoring report. So instead of a whole binder of data to flip through that may be significant or not significant, we've asked the management team to go through each of the board's 14 goals, try to summarize the strategies put in place, some of the data and artifacts collected, some analysis of that, and some highlights. So essentially what you see is a 2-page report on each goal. Chapter 13 is a little longer, so it has some extra analysis and extra data. Essentially, that means that the governing board goals report is 29 pages with introduction, table of contents, and those kind of things. We are continuing to archive all of the data and try to make account for the gaps in it that were a byproduct of dealing with the pandemic. I would say, before I delve into this, a couple things. One is that, and I'm sure people are finding this in other places, the work of the district in continuing to try to deliver, safe, orderly, appropriately challenging education for our children also comes along with all of the other things that have always been in the environment, issues with families, both of our students and of our staff, things that come up in people's lives that can be distractive and disruptive, and all of that compounded by having to deal with COVID. And I don't think that our district would be unique in saying that the staff has really worked hard to put their best foot forward and rise to the occasion. But I think our district, like other places, are beginning to weary of the pandemic. People are a little exhausted by the ongoing extra effort. And we worked to try to manage this report in a way that's reflective of all the additional work the district's doing and all the additional issues we're dealing with, not just COVID itself, but the stress that it places on our kids, our families, and our staff. Of course, I want to think everybody's doing their best to deal with things, but I think that everybody is feeling the stress of this ongoing community health concern. So when you open up the cover, you will see a special thanks to all the people who helped with compiling, narrating, editing this report for you tonight. The table of contents really reflects the 14 goals, as well as a brief introduction. In the past, the introduction was quite a bit longer and elaborate and explained the goals monitoring cycle and a little bit about the governance approach. You will see that there's a bit of an introduction about the development of the goals and the history of the report. In the first page of the introduction, the 6 guiding principles that we've adopted, and the most recent version of the board's goals, which you may remember sometime back, we revised in some cases a little more substantially. Probably the greatest revision was highlighting measures of academic growth and mastery into goal 3 or 1C, and taking out the goal of getting technology into everybody's hands, as we pretty much accomplished that during the pandemic. And so we have rearranged the work and the data to align with the revised goals for 2021. This is part of all of the wrap up of the 2021 school year. At your last regular meeting, you saw the annual financial report for the numbers for the district. This is a summary of the other goals for that. The final evaluation work on that year really takes place in December when you complete the superintendent's evaluation. And then our attention turns into beginning to make decisions to build the program for fiscal 22-23. And January will be here before we know it. On the second page, there's 2 diagrams that show the monitoring cycle. And then it shows the monitoring cycle laid out with the graphic of the fence between the roles of the board and the roles of the management team or the implementation team. the board's role in setting policy and desired ends for the district, and the management's team role in implementing them. And that even though this is a cycle, the work that we're doing today is completing the cycle for the work the board put in place in the spring of 2020, which the management team implemented over the 2021 school year. So once this is complete, really, we start to talk about adjustments we might want to make. Then as the legislature convenes in January, what issues that and opportunities that might present and how to handle those going forward. Pretty much the district office management team and the governing board are working on wrapping up one year and starting another. At the same time, the teachers and the students are implementing. And so that work is continuous on the top side of the cycle. At the same time, the work is continuous on the bottom part of the cycle. Just that our work as the governance team overlaps one year to the next as the instructional cycle is going on. There were some interesting things that have influenced the data and the outcomes. The reduction of capital funding, which was a decade long, recessionary impacts in our mortgage crisis, elimination of full day kindergarten funding, charter school openings, the establishment of our first capital override, which allowed us really to be able to respond to a lot of the things that happen, especially the need for technology, the extension of the school year, and changes in development rates and local municipal planning, which is ongoing. Reports from the school facility board indicate that significant increase in the number of students electing to attend charters happened when we had the 200-day school year. Of course, you know also that charter intrusion into enrollment during 2018-19 when new charters opened up has also added some pressure to the district. The same time we had COVID, we also had remote learning due to the pandemic. While development activity around us is increasing and growth is expected to continue, we're still optimistic about our outlook and what challenges may lie ahead. That is the most abbreviated introduction we've ever given to this report. And what we hope is the board will find that as we go through the chapters, we've done a good job of picking out things that are salient. But of course, we'll stop at the end of each chapter to see if there's questions or other things that the board would like us to bring back. As I said, we're still tracking data. We're just not presenting every bit of data on every chapter tonight. And we're hoping that you like the new layout. And of course, this is the first time we presented this in this way. So feedback about the monitoring report presentation, format, or content are all welcome as we go through this presentation. Mr. President, I'd just like to know if you want us to progress through the chapters, or with each break and the agenda, you want to check with members to see if we should go on. The next part of the agenda, 6B, is the first 3 chapters with Ms. Van de Water, and I will kind of stand down until we get to part G, goal 12, so you can preside the meeting as you wish.
Go ahead and make one presentation instead of one chapter and see how we do at the end of that. If there's no too many
All right.
questions, we'll go forward. So that way we'll be able to keep the thought going as to
Yes, sir.
what's going on with that.
President Nielsen, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman. Chapter 1 focuses on the district's ensuring a rigorous, viable, and consistent curriculum that holds high expectations for all students. The strategies outlined in this chapter include teachers planning for tiered instruction in all content areas, including math, English language arts, science, history, social science, and special areas, based on the 5 instructional quality components and key indicators aligned to the district's curriculum and assessment documents, as well as the Arizona state standards. Even during the pandemic and having to transition between in-person and dynamic distance learning, we provided a rigorous, viable, and consistent curriculum holding high expectations for all of our Littleton students. The provided recommended instructional time allocations for in-person and dynamic distance learning for all core content areas were utilized to develop master schedules customized to meet the needs of our students. We were able to easily adjust between in-person and dynamic distance learning with minimal disruption to learning and still adhere to the state required instructional minutes. Core and supplemental materials were used to plan and prepare tiered instruction aligned to the district's pacing guides. Educators plan lessons aligned to the Littleton key instructional practices, which include engagement, student cognition level, aligned standards and objectives, lesson delivery and design, as well as the learning environment. Utilizing the professional learning community process, educators collaborated around instruction, unpacking essential standards and skills, developed common formative assessments, conducted data analysis of assessment results, and planned for interventions and extensions of learning to differentiate for all of our learners. Each grade level and content area team developed collective commitments and applied them to their daily practice, aligned to the school and grade level goals, their resources, and the instructional quality plan. Each team committed to utilizing the district's adopted curriculum to provide quality instruction to all students following an allocation of time, whole group, and small group learning, and utilizing and analyzing assessment data to drive instruction to meet the needs of all of our learners. During the FY 2021 school year, Littleton Elementary School District was prepared for in-person, hybrid, and remote learning. Represented in the charts in Chapter 1 are the recommended instructional minute allocations for the models we followed throughout the school year. To allow for consistency in learning and a seamless process between the home and school, teachers provided Monday through Friday virtual support, virtual office hours, and virtual small group intervention and extension activities to provide students with an opportunity to deepen their understanding of these concepts and skills, ask questions, and engage in small group activities with their peers. Within the school day and at home, students had instruction and are learning for 7 hours a day, and teachers instructed in person as well as virtually. Administration conducted weekly classroom walkthroughs, either in person or virtually, using our frontline system and the Danielson framework for teaching and learning to provide feedback and coaching support to our educators. At times, the consistency and practice of walkthroughs was disrupted by dynamic distance learning. The framework for teaching is an instructional resource providing a roadmap for effective teaching, outlining 22 components and 76 elements organized into 4 domains of teaching: planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities. During the 2021 school year, 282 classroom walkthroughs were conducted to provide feedback and coaching support to our teachers, and the majority of our teachers within these 2 domains were in the effective category, as you see evidenced by the rubric and criteria categories on the chart. For the 21-22 school year, leaders are conducting weekly classroom walkthroughs as a consistent practice, and we will be able to share comparative data within each one of these domains and across our 7 schools. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have for Chapter 1.
Any questions? John?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. As I look at this chart down here, the domains 2 and 3, what are domains 2 and 3?
Domains 2 and 3 are what our administrators can see when they go into classrooms to observe planning and preparation, as well as lesson delivery and design.
And so if A, B, C, and D, right? That's all one. So 2 A, B, C, D, E, that's all one domain, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Rader.
And then, of course, 3 A, B, C, D, and E is the second domain.
That's correct.
Okay. So just again, I know you were looking at a little bit of feedback from the board. I find this chart to be, again, first of all, it doesn't include all 4 domains that we're measuring. So I guess the next component would be like, why were the other domains left off? And then I guess the fact that it's broken out into 5 different components within those domains. And I don't know what that necessarily means or represents. So I guess in this format, it would almost be more helpful if it was all just aggregated and then I knew which domains we were, all 4 domains, and then which ones we were working effectively in and which ones we maybe needed more work on. So that would be my feedback, because I do find this chart to be a little bit confusing.
I appreciate the feedback, Mr. Rader. For example, domain 4 is a category of professional responsibility. So domains 2 and 3 are more easily represented when administrators go into the classroom to observe instruction and practice, and then provide coaching, feedback, and support to teachers, because they're observable when they're reviewing their instruction. But we can absolutely take a look at other ways to report out this data, as we just started this past year using the Frontline system in this digital format. So the feedback is appreciated, and we can review additional charts to provide.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy?
So mine is along those guidelines as well. I found that chart extremely confusing. I don't know the definition of domain, to be quite honest. Without you telling me, I wouldn't have had a clue what domain you're measuring. So maybe if we're going to do a domain measurement, maybe we can identify or definition of what the domain is. That would be very helpful. And honestly, when I look at it, not really understanding how it was developed or what's in it, it means nothing to me. I mean, it must stand for something. I just can't quite understand what it's for. And then the other thing is the feedback in terms of, I didn't quite understand. So if 282 classrooms were walked through for 2021 and coaching support to teachers, was that during active teaching, or how are you getting 282 in classroom when predominantly was online?
Member Reyes, thank you for the feedback as well as the question. Our administrators, between our principal, assistant principal, and dean, do conduct monthly classroom walkthroughs. That happens in person, and over the last 2 years, it happened as well virtually. So it is administrators observing instruction live, either going into the classroom or in person. And this, we can provide additional information on how this is developed. We use in our organization the Charlotte Danielson Framework for Teaching, and it is a measurement of teaching performance. Teachers strive throughout each one of their years to be highly effective. And so when our administrators observe instruction, they're able, within each one of the components and domains on this rubric and set of criteria, to give them coaching support to help them improve their practice and their craft.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me ask Amy, I'll get back to you. Amy, have you got any comments there?
I don't have any comments. I think because I do spend my time as a teacher looking at the domains. I understood the domains, but I understand if people aren't familiar with them, why that'd be confusing. So I'm good.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for not asking this the first time. But just again, point of clarification, these are all singular visits. There's no repeat visits with classrooms to see if the teacher has incorporated the feedback and or improved as a part of the process.
Member Ader, yes, each one of these 282 visits accounts for one teacher, one visit. And this is outside of the formal observation and evaluation process. Classroom walkthroughs are really for an administrator to go into a classroom for up to 15 minutes to provide coaching, feedback, and support to that teacher from that moment in time.
Okay. No, and thank you. And it's again, we have amazing teachers in the district, and I'm certainly appreciative of all their hard work, especially last year. I am a little surprised though that 0 out of it looks like the entire right-hand column there, 0 out of 282 were highly effective. So again, do you account, and maybe you were explaining this before, but do you believe that is just because of the newness of this tool, or is this just an area of continued development in the district here?
Member Rader, this always is ongoing improvement for teachers to be reflective on their practice. We do have highly effective teachers in our overall evaluation system. And so this is just, again, capturing classroom walkthrough practice.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess I know we've got a lot of data, but I guess if you're saying that we know we have highly effective teachers based on other observations, yet we're using a tool that indicates that we don't, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with that dichotomy, because certainly if you're saying one thing, but we're observing another in our classroom visits. I don't know if we need to continue like going back and forth regarding that. I find that to be a kind of an interesting item for continued examination as well.
Thank you, Member Rader. We can provide more information on this particular Danielson framework for teaching. Over an entire year's segment of time, a teacher can be highly effective in the evaluation process. This would be just for the snapshot of looking for example, 3C for student engagement for that 15 minutes of time to give that teacher some feedback on that particular instructional strategy within just that one period.
And this was done just once in this period of virtual and whatever else. I mean, in the futures are going to be done on a quarterly basis or semi-annually, or the observations are continual, right? So this 282 in the future, this is just a snapshot from one period. Was it 1 month, 1 week? What time period was that?
President Nielsen, this was 282 teachers. So an administrator going into one teacher's class for 10 to 15 minutes and utilizing the rubric to give them a score and coaching feedback.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in here, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a teacher, not a teacher, an administrator logging in if I'm teaching online and observing my class if I'm online at the time and evaluating how effective I am teaching online. And for some of our teachers, this was brand new and they may not have quite gotten to the highly effective range because it's a new modality of teaching, correct?
Member Solshnak, thank you for your question. I would say that our teachers have never experienced before teaching virtually. And so, that was their first time where an administrator would be coming in, logging into their Google Meet or their Google Classroom using this particular framework and the electronic platform of teaching. And so, our teachers were given feedback in the virtual setting for the first time using this framework.
I'm not going to beat it anymore, but I do think if I was a parent and I saw highly effective as 0, it would be a very big concern for me out of not understanding. And again, I think it's conceptually hard to understand this. And I think that's probably some of the challenges. Like what you said, if it's measuring the first time you're teaching online, that's to me a little bit different. But if I was a parent and saw that and thought, okay, you're teaching online and none of you are highly effective, that just out of 282, we don't have anyone, not even one, that was highly effective in teaching online versus what I heard you say is that it was more the modality of the teaching method and stuff like that. So to me, I just think it's the way it's laid out is really confusing. So, but thank you.
We appreciate the feedback.
I think just one other comment I would like to make is with my engineering background, over here, you've got the Illuminate, the Fast Bridge, the Achieve 3000, and the Dreambox, I think are all online things. It says there's a chart available for those. Are those available so you can see between one point and another point? Or I think that was, as I understand, over the year, this year and into next year, we could look at this year as the starting point, and then there would be charts available. Maybe we didn't put those in there at this particular time, but I certainly would like to see, I don't know, I like the charts in there just to see where we're going and what's going on with those, if there is some effective use of those particular items.
President Nielsen, members of the board, yes, we do have those data charts and we are collecting the data now. So we would be able to provide those to you at a future meeting.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to the next one, please. What's that?
Can I ask a question? Clarifying question?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I wasn't sure if it was clear, Ms. Vandewater, that everyone was asked to choose something they thought was important or salient to put in the report. What was your thinking for including the domain 2 and 3 walkthrough information as something that would be important for the board to be able to see and review?
I think Superintendent Freeman, members of the board, we provide rich professional development to our teachers. They work very hard for planning and preparation to provide instruction to our students of the highest level of quality. And they appreciate the feedback from administration to celebrate their craft and to improve their craft. And this Danielson rubric for teaching, the effective category is actually pretty exceptional for our teachers. And so I thought that this was representative of the challenging time that they had to teach virtually and only be in person for 41 days. And so the effective category, I think, shows that we have exceptional teachers. They're taking professional development, feedback, and coaching support from administrators and putting that into practice in the classroom for teachers. Every year, teachers are, learners, and they take what they receive and they apply that to the classroom. And so I think, to your point, board members, it would be helpful to learn more about the rubric to fully understand the different categories within the domain and how developing and effective are actually helpful to teachers to receive that feedback and work their way to highly effective for each lesson and every segment of teaching each year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that enlightenment. All right, let's move on to,
Mr.
Chapter
Nelson,
2.
May I make a recommendation? Rather than reading to us the paragraphs, if a person would be willing just to summarize it and then let us
your
look.
mic on.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay,
I was just going to make a recommendation rather than reading us the paragraphs, if they could just kind of summarize their chapters and then we could ask questions, because honestly, we can read along. So with all due respect, I mean, I don't, if you want them, that's fine. I don't need to have them read to me. I could just do that and then they could summarize and I could ask questions if that's appropriate.
Well, it's part of the reason we shortened it.
Yeah,
So you can
thank
be able to
you.
do that.
Okay,
that
thank
would be
you.
fine.
Chapter 2 is focusing on teachers differentiating their instruction to meet the needs of our diverse population. You can see that the strategies outlined in this chapter include teachers providing targeted instruction, using resources to impact growth and support all learners, also appropriately identifying students with exceptional needs and providing them services and opportunities to increase their growth and performance, as well as facilitating well-being activities through student agency and character development efforts. This chapter outlines teachers using our resources such as Wonders, Go Math, 95% Group, Haggerty, Sunday, Discovery Education, Fast Forward. The list is extensive in terms of core materials that we have adopted, as well as supplemental materials. Each school has a multi-tiered system of support team that they utilize a 4-step problem-solving process to identify student learning problems, maybe understand why these learning problems existed, and provide interventions and extensions to students based upon need. We provided in our in-person and virtual learning capacity these interventions and extension opportunities for our students, so we could target their explicit needs and assist them in growing in terms of student achievement. During the 2020-21 school year, we had staff providing special education services to 971 students. 15 of those students were privately placed. Over the course of that year, we had 1,517 meetings conducted related to special education services. We continue to work on growing our gifted services program, and we had 281 students on our campuses receiving enrichment through gifted program services and our Flex program. We continue to develop our student agency efforts. Weekly character development activities were conducted during morning breakfast and student agency time, where students had an opportunity in person or virtually to work with their teacher and their peers on developing conversation skills, managing productivity in team settings, work on collaborative efforts, positive self-talk, affirmations, learning how to continue to be kind and helpful, and making an honest effort in focusing on solutions instead of problems. We are looking forward to presenting the next time we do the monitoring report in FY 21-22, our newly adopted supplemental material, All Things EQ, which is assisting us in continuing to build student agency and develop and enhance character and leadership development skills. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on Chapter 2.
Kathy, go ahead, please.
Do you have any idea of a district equivalent to our size, what the percentage of gifted is relative to our gifted number of students? If not, it's fine. You can find out later and get back. I'm just curious what that relevancy is in terms of gifted.
Member Reyes, I don't have that data here, but we can certainly look into that for neighboring districts and bring that back to you. Sure.
Any others? Not, let's go ahead to the next chapter.
Chapter 3 focuses on our efforts to assist students in demonstrating growth toward mastery on the Arizona state standards. And this is in alignment with state summative assessments as well as our district's assessment plan. Littleton students demonstrated growth towards mastery on the Arizona state standards throughout the year on district created assessments, as well as the annual summative state assessment. To measure progress each year, the Littleton district creates a district's assessment plan to ensure teachers and students are focused on their intended learning goals, and they're able to progress monitor and conduct checkpoints throughout the course of the year to keep our students on track. We have a very balanced district assessment plan, and that includes a variety of assessments ranging from screeners to diagnostic assessments, common formative assessments that teachers develop together as teams, classroom summatives that happen at the end of a week or at the end of a month, also interim assessments, as well as end of the year assessments. You've heard the words professional learning communities throughout presentations to the board. And our educators worked in collaborative professional learning community teams to review and analyze that data, determine any teaching changes or implications that they might need to make, as well as provide interventions and extensions to meet the needs of all of our learners. This process was ongoing. It occurred daily, sometimes weekly, monthly, in person, as well as virtually. We did hear feedback from many of our teachers that one of the benefits of the pandemic and being virtual was that they had a stronger sense of time to collaborate through Zoom and get together to review data and discuss how they might provide changes to their teaching or small group instruction for students during their office hours, virtually or in person. You can see from some of the charts represented there, those are representative of our district's interim assessments. We do administer those several times throughout the year, periodically through our Illuminate platform. Students are familiar with that platform where they take their assessments digitally, and that supplies our teachers with student data in a variety of formats, predictive readiness for potentially later success on a summative assessment, or how they're progressing with the Arizona state standards within their grade level in the areas of math and or ELA. You can see that over the past 5 years, the overall ELA proficiency on interims has grown on an average of 9.5% from 2016 to the 2021 school year. As well as over the last 5 years, the overall math proficiency on our interims has grown on an average of 9% from 2016 to 2021. We also have been utilizing a program called Dreambox to assist teachers in measuring mathematics growth and readiness towards Arizona state standards and performance on summative assessments. This program is a digital program, so we were able to use that in person as well as virtually remote hybrid learning, whole class, as well as small group lessons. Dreambox observes 60 different assessment points, and you can see that students from this chart, what it's representing is that students who completed 5 or more Dreambox lessons tend to have a higher growth on the standards and proficiency in the area of math. And our students in the 2021 school year who completed 5 or more of those lessons grew on an average of 19 math standards over the course of 1 year. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions on the particular one? Go ahead, please, Kathy.
In the interim 2 and 3, actually it's 1, 2, and 3. Why is the data from 17, 18 missing?
Member Rice, thank you for your question. For math in that year, we did not administer the interim assessments because we were piloting some of our math programs. So we were getting math data from those pilots.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just generally speaking, would you expect growth from interim 1 to 2 to 3? I just asked because I do find it interesting that in the math interims, we went from a 40% proficiency, and it looks like we actually went down or in each of the subsequent interims. Would we typically expect growth, and can we attribute that to anything?
Member Reader, on our interim assessments from interim 1 to 2 to 3, they're not covering the same standards. So it's not apples to apples. The assessment covers a segment of time. So for maybe 6 to 8 weeks of teaching, there might be 5 math standards taught. And so on that interim assessment, we have questions just associated with those standards. And so some of them spiral throughout the course of the year from one interim to the next. We might repeat a standard, but it's not the same standards on each one of the assessments. So we have to look at those as individual measures. So we're measuring growth within just standards and that teaching moment. Thank you.
Just to follow up, if I may, to that question. So if they're teaching different segments in the different sections, progressively, would you not hope to see, I understand the segments are different, but would you not expect that the segment 1 would lead you to become better at segment 2 and that would become to segment 3, or is that just not the way it works?
Member Reyes, some of the standards spiral, and we would hope that this is a measure, an indicator for the summative state assessment, because we design our interims also around the standards within like 3rd grade math that are assessed on the state assessment. So the hope would be that throughout these 3 assessments, they would be able to perform at a higher level on all of those standards on the AZM2 or on the state assessment test.
And one more follow-up. When you look at this, do you ever go back and say, okay, we had some growth in interim 1, that's good, right? Would you never go back then and look and say, we must have not taught all the basic standards in interim 1. We missed something, right? To get you ready for 2 and definitely get you ready for 3. Do you go back and analyze what 1 looks like and where there may be more training needed to get you better at 2 and 3?
Absolutely, Member Reyes. Our teachers use this information as well as our administrators to guide interventions, reteaching and enriching, small group instruction, or maybe some basic foundational skills or gaps that might need to be filled as students progress throughout the year. It also gives us information about overall program and our pacing guides and design of maybe we have to move a standard that we teach in Q2 into Q1. And so we use that also to inform our viable curriculum progression.
Yeah, I think math is always something we've struggled, and I just don't quite understand. I mean, for years, it's been hovering, and you kind of make you wonder, what do we need to do better, or where should we go? Or I don't have the answers. Yeah, it's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just have a question, if I may, about the numbers right there, the 2021. That reflects, I guess really what I'm asking is that the virtual learnings in that time period, the tests that work here, does this really tell us that the virtual teaching, instructing may not have been doing as well as in person? I mean, is that one of the other things that it's telling us with some of these lower numbers in this aspect of it, or does that time period fit into here?
President Nielsen, I definitely think that virtual learning probably had an impact on some of the instruction that we were able to provide, but it's a celebration. One of the reasons why I put this here is because over the last couple of years, we've seen some growth. And so that's telling us that maybe our teachers are improving their practice for math, or that our students are making some gains in both ELA and math on some of those foundational skills.
So I think, like you said earlier, it's not apples to apples. This is apples to bananas or something compared to the other ones back there. And we really ought to look at that as just an individual crazy number right there that gives some idea of what we've done with virtual learning as well as the other one. That can't compare it to the other years previously. Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So there probably are some challenges with interpreting this data. And so the questions are really informative. One of the things that happens in this data that's different than typically what you'd see is the most recent year is first and 5 years ago is last in each of the groups. It gives the appearance that achievement is going downhill, which is a subconscious inference that people would make looking at it. So if you had the 16-17 first and the 20-21 last, it would give the appearance the data was going uphill, which would be good. And so for Ms. Reyes's question, you would think of these each as 3 different subjects. If you thought of them as math, science, and social studies, that you were testing 3 different things at 3 different times, that would be a better example. Now, what really we're doing is looking at growth of the system over time. So if you look from 2016 up to 2021 in the first set of data, you see that it going from in the mid-20s to the mid-30s, a 10% growth over 5 years of kids showing progress in the first interim. So these are a lot of the things that we're giving you as measures are developmental. It shows the work happening in the district. So like the walkthroughs are developmental, they're not summative. And I think Ms. Reyes made a good point early on. Anybody else looking at this is going to think they're summative, not that they're formative, that they're helping us learn and grow as a school system, but that we're actually showing you a measure of the kids, which isn't really what we were doing. So on these, you see basically a trend from 16-17 to 2021, an increase in the performance of students in all of the interims. If you look at each one separately, what's surprising is in the first interim, 2021 and 19-20 are fairly close. You see a drop in the second set and in the third set, which probably is due to having to do most of the school year online. The kids actually did better before COVID than after COVID. We would expect to see that. What we would hope to see if we continue this is that we recover that loss and the interims each continue to improve with student cohorts over time. You see the same thing in math. where the district had in the third cohort gone from 16, 17 up to 46%, whatever that is in 1920, and then significant drops in math in the 2021 school year because you spent all but 40 days online. So we would expect to see some performance drop. And so if you kind of flip these and think of time-wise, and then think of each of them as a separate subject, the data starts to make more sense in what we saw in the kids in those measurements. Is that helpful?
It is very helpful. It's not. It is very helpful the way you explained it.
And I appreciate that as well, because I was just looking for something. I didn't bring my reading glasses
Yeah, me
tonight.
neither.
I'm trying to figure out now that when you said that, I'm going to read it backwards or upside down here, but maybe the way that we all think about it from left to right rather than backwards might be helpful to do it. Because I stumbled on the same thing as well, not being able to see the numbers down at the bottom. So appreciate that. Anything else on that chapter? Next chapter.
President Nielsen, members of the board. Chapter 4 is a safe learning and working environment created and maintained for student, staff, and community. So of course, this is a priority for the district, and we use two primary accountability systems for students. One is Make Your Day. The other is Positive Behavior Interventions and Support, which is also known as PBIS. Staff continue to follow the Employee Code of Conduct, known as the ECOC. Wellness for both staff and students, particularly mental health, was a primary focus as we continue to navigate uncharted waters with COVID-19. As referenced in the Well Styles chart, we had a record number of staff participate in the program. This program included a mindset component along with COVID tips. Employee discipline incidents were lower than usual, most likely due in large part to the year being in a remote work setting. We also had an increase in emergency after hours calls, also most likely as the result of normal traffic and procedures being disrupted by COVID. One point of interest, despite the fear of COVID and safety associated with it, teacher perceptions about safety increased dramatically in 2021. 98% of them responded that they have a safe place to work. We worked very hard to communicate all of our safety precautions and procedures to ensure our learning and working environment was optimal. And I would be happy to entertain any questions that you might have about this chapter.
Please, Kathy, go ahead.
Commend you on getting 311 people. That is not easy. That is commendable. I'm impressed because that's like herding cows to feed.
Yes, it is.
So that's impressive,
Thank you.
and that takes a lot of effort. I do realize that. So good job. And the employees do like it once they participate. They do find it valuable. So I commend your staff. That takes a lot of extra work and extra time. So good job on that.
Thank you.
John, Amy? I don't have any other questions there. Thank you so much. Chapter 5.
Chapter 5 focuses on students demonstrating appropriate social behavior, common courtesy, and good citizenship. And the strategies outlined in this chapter include communicating the rules, the expectations, consequence, and rewards for student behavior, the way in which student behavior and concerns are addressed, and the ways in which our school communities exemplify character, good citizenship, and values student well-being. We continued in our school district, even during virtual learning, to practice our 3 powerful belief systems that positively impact our behaviors, courtesy, and citizenship. Kids at Hope philosophy, our Make Your Day program, and our positive behavior intervention and support at Country Place Leadership Academy. Students and families received an electronic district student parent handbook outlining the district Make Your Day program and the PBIS program at Country Place, as well as the Kids at Hope philosophy and student behavior guidelines. aligned to the Arizona Department of Education. For the FY 2021 school year, we had 75 student referrals. Again, we had only 41 days of in-person learning, and those referrals were kindergarten through 8th grade. And students over those 75 student referrals missed approximately 213 days of school. And those suspensions ranged from computer violations, fighting, disruption, as well as some tobacco incidents. I also wanted to highlight in one of the charts the responses in our perceiver data during the FY 2021 school year to show how the 3 beliefs that we have, especially kids at hope, impact the whole child. That was important during COVID more than ever, and children having an ACE involved in supporting them. And with 78% of the responders agreeing that students in the school are responsible and respectful to everyone. And this was an increase of 24% from 2 years prior and during our pandemic. And so I think that really is representative and highlights in Littleton that all means all, and everybody inside the school community and within the outside community was really partnering for the benefit of student and staff well-being. We were also able, even with only being in person for 41 days, we did not stop offering clubs to our students. Students had the opportunity to engage virtually to get involved during dynamic distance learning in virtual athletic programs, virtual clubs, art club, student council, creative writing, and National Junior Honor Society, to name a few of those, to keep their motivation and engagement alive. And our families and community got involved in some of those things as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on Chapter 5.
Go ahead, John. Oops.
No, thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't really have any concerns regarding the data. I think it's all very positive, certainly skewed, of course, a bit. So it's hard to draw any conclusions regarding our suspension data. I guess and it's not represented here, but I can't recall, do we track step 4 data for the district and how many of those that there are in a school, and maybe along those same lines, how long the student is actually out of the classroom on average for each of those step 4s?
Member Rader, we do track Make Your Day step 4s in our student synergy information system, as well as our Country Place Leadership PBIS progressive program. I don't have that data with me this evening, but we would be able to provide that to you. I don't have that represented on this chart, but it is easily exported from Synergy. And in terms of how long students are outside of the classroom, that is something that is managed within our front office with our office juniors. So that could be also a data point that we would be able to provide at a later meeting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I know that we had a person come to one of our previous meetings and bring this up as a concern. And so I was kind of curious as maybe we move forward, if that's also a data point we might want to track. Again, certainly we need to hold all students accountable for their actions, and that's an important component of ensuring a positive learning environment for all of our students that are there. But at the same time, missed education time is missed education time, right? So certainly being cognizant of that point is also very important to me.
Thank you.
Dr. Freeman, would it be appropriate to just review with the board what the outcome of that?
Would you like me to do that?
Would you please do that? Yes, sir.
So, President Nielsen, members of the board, your governing board president did make sure that the superintendent management team followed up with that parent. Their concerns had not been expressed to the principal before. So they did meet and go over those. I think the communication helped a lot. It's my understanding, the reflection of the principal was that the meeting went very well and the parent left satisfied. But it is sometimes, a common theme or issue with us is when they get upset and there's a board meeting, they want to go, right to the top instead of through what would be standard procedures for resolving grievances or complaints. And so we did follow up, and I understood that there was a positive resolution. There is and has been, mostly prior to the pandemic, a concern about students being on step 4 for an extended period of time. Usually that's because, parents wouldn't or couldn't become available. One of the things that did happen during virtual learning is the administration allowed virtual step 4 conferences, which made them much more accessible to parents and got kids back into the room quicker. I don't know if that is something that will continue to be a standard, but I think our parent community appreciated it very much because you could essentially step out of your workplace in the hallway for 15 minutes, have a conference with your child and decide if you need to come get them or if they can go back to the room, and has a similar effect. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, being remote or being in school certainly impacted that data.
Thank you. I guess just,
Oh, I apologize.
go ahead, John.
I was just to that point. I mean, I guess every situation is unique, and we'd want to provide our administrators some discretion to determine whether an in-person meeting was necessary. But certainly, I think for many families, even if you have a very engaged and caring parent, given their work situation, it just might not be possible for them to come to the school in a timely manner. So I would certainly be supportive of efforts to make additional modalities available so that parents can engage and we can get students back into the classroom as quickly as possible. Again, with the caveat that we want to still provide some discretion for principals and to make that determination as needed.
Thank you.
I just want to make one comment.
Yes.
I agree with that, but I'm also, I want to never discourage a step 4. I definitely, you could say a child's name and I could tell you, I see that child every year. I hear that name. And for me to know that, that's so scary, right? So I have no problem with it if it gets to a level where it is total disruption. And it's there has to be something done because all children suffer at that point, right? So I do understand and I encourage it. I don't like it, but sometimes I just think, unfortunately, if parents aren't willing to do something and step up, and this child continues or children continue to be, I think I've talked to many, they're just frustrated, and nobody wants these children in their classroom, right? Because they know they're not able to produce learners for everyone else because all their attention goes. So I definitely agree with it, but I am also, I understand and I want us to continue on that if that's absolutely necessary. Unfortunately, I don't know what else to do other than do that kind of behavioral assessments.
Yeah, the philosophy of the district in discipline, whether it's kids or grown up, is that it's progressive. So if you allow, a certain number of remote step 4 parent conferences and the child repeats the behavior, then the conclusion you would draw is the remote conference isn't being effective. And so it would make sense to be more demanding on that relationship. And so the problem would be, and this might be to the point of the data, if you're continually doing remote step 4 conferences and nothing is changing, why are you continually doing remote step 4 conferences?
Thank you. Any other comments on that one? Chapter 6.
Thank you, President Nielsen and Governing Board. We're moving on to Chapter 6, which is around families as partners. We have interpreted the strategies to support this goal around parents monitoring progress, families selecting programs for the kids, communication with teachers and students, and families being involved through parent meetings. I'll be sharing highlights of the data and lessons learned in these areas over the last school year. Recognizing that the important role that parents play was huge last year. To how parents supported their children. This past year meant we had to find ways to leverage technology to keep parents engaged in virtual events. Events such as curriculum nights and conferences continued as scheduled, just in a different format. We held meetings via Zoom. We met in Google Classrooms for the first time. As you know, school choice in our district means our families can request enrollment in any of our academies. Since inception of the school choice concept, we have organized a kickoff event, created hoopla, and asked parents and students to come out and declare their school of choice. Typically, it's held right here in this boardroom during National School Choice Week, and thousands of people come through the doors. Much to my dismay, that was different last year as well. Looking at the data page I have prepared for tonight, I'd first like to talk about the perceiver data. Teachers reported an increase in agreement that families were involved in their children's education. Distance learning helped identify families who were struggling to stay engaged, and I believe this increase in agreement is due to the way relationships were developed during the 2021 school year. Some parents listened and or watched in virtual classrooms. Some parents spoke to the teacher when they were on live. Information was exchanged through Google tools, and texting between teachers and parents was happening every day. As the exchange of information became tied to goals for teachers and even the superintendent, we were focusing on the number of two-way communications successfully happening. The next two pieces of perceiver data from parents was interesting. The parents' responses and agreement with satisfaction with communication from the teacher dropped, and feeling welcome in the virtual classroom also dropped, but slightly, but still remained over 92% where it had been for the last 3 years. So parents did feel welcome when they were dropping in on the virtual classrooms. It was encouraging to see that 85.7% of the students responding reported that their family said good things about their school, as you can see, and that was an increase. So the school was in the home, and the families were saying good things. During the pandemic, different strategies were used to encourage parents to log into Parent View, including Ms. Vanderwater and I getting together and deciding to place the digital student handbook and the report cards right in the portal. Any reason we could find to push parents there. After seeing a dip in usage, you can see on the chart, Littleton ESD developed a communications campaign to regularly remind parents why they should be accessing the portal. And we saw a significant increase in usage during the 2021 school year. In 18-19, we had 21,448 successful logins recorded. 19-20, there came that big dip, 16,044. Then last year, all-time high, we logged 47,450 hits. We are now adding to the strategies from last year, including asks to monitor attendance and call us and talk about it if they don't agree with it, as well as having our online academy parents use the portal to log participation minutes each week. So we can anticipate increasing our usage again this year. School choice was moved to later in the spring, you may remember. Really, that was about to help lessen confusion as we invited students back to our classrooms for the fourth quarter. So we first asked them what they wanted to do for the fourth quarter, and we separated that from this year so that parents would not be confused. Asking for a response digitally served us well, and we did see an increase in responses in that area as well. For years, we have had a centralized IT help desk. Last year, another was set up to help support parents and keep them engaged in their students' education. We set up a help desk dedicated to students and families who might need tech support. We published a dedicated phone number and trained and assigned mostly bus drivers to assist families to stay connected and access curriculum. It was amazing to see the skill level develop as our drivers, who were first answering calls, taking the information and giving it over to us, start to become proficient enough to handle the calls as they were coming in. So I've placed a link to the Google site if anyone is interested in seeing the kinds of things that we posted throughout distance learning. And the graph on the bottom of the page is one example of the success we had using Remind. You might have remember hearing quite a bit about Remind. It's a secure tool that allows teachers and administration to send announcements via text messages to groups or to communicate back and forth with individual parents. Text-based communications were used to share information on general school business, COVID safety and mitigation, instruction, and sometimes just to simply check in. The snapshot shows that we sent out 670,743 messages in a month, and it makes sense that it was an average month because we logged almost 6.7 million in the last year. I had the pleasure of meeting with our representatives from Remind, and we were often commended for the way we used it. We used it to engage our parents, which I'll talk a little bit more in my next chapter. Anything I can clarify?
Any questions?
Yeah, they were highly complimentary every time they wanted to talk to me about it. So it's good. Okay, so I'll move on to chapter 7, Mr. President, Governing Board. The second goal was also related to families as partners and about employees and families communicating effectively. Strategies include sending timely information using a variety of methods and modeling excellent customer or communication and customer service skills. As students were in dynamic distance learning most of the year, digital tools became the primary source to facilitate communication between home and school. Instruction was taking place in living rooms and kitchens, and relationships were being built primarily across screens and those text messages that I talked about earlier. School leaders and dynamic digital communicators worked together with the public information officer and the superintendent's office to provide timely and accurate information during unprecedented times. We were fortunate to have spent years nurturing this goal, so we had established trust that we would communicate, and most of our families knew where to go to find information and expect that we would. We had really worked to make sure they knew that we would say something. I've included a graph on social media that shows our Facebook followers grew the second semester of 1920 when we transitioned to distance learning, and it kind of had a big spike there when we shut down. And then the following year, which would be last year, we saw some moderate growth. We are currently using Facebook, Twitter, and new last year, we started an Instagram account, but we continue to see most activity on Facebook, which has been consistent since we started utilizing social media to interact with our community. We use an auto dialer, which allows us to quickly and efficiently call all of our families in a matter of minutes. We use it for daily welfare calls in the event a student is marked absent and we have not yet heard from the family about why the student is not attending. On the bottom portion of the auto dialer graph, you can see the usage for announcements and events declining. This really is not because we communicate less. It is because school leaders and teachers regularly use Remind, so there's less of a need to call when we can send a text message. According to Text Magic, US smartphone users send and receive 5 times more texts than they receive calls. Over 68% of consumers said they text more than they talk on their smartphones, and we believe it's more convenient for working parents to monitor texts than giving them a phone call. There's also a behavior that many of us may have that when we don't know the number that comes up on our phone, we don't necessarily answer it, which again makes text messaging more convenient. The next table shows a significant drop in concerns received at the district level from our stakeholders, with the majority of our students spending 3/4 of the year in distance learning. Things that typically might surface related to being in person just simply didn't happen. I don't think the number of typical concerns dropping is any surprise. The reason I did include this table is concerns across the world during this period centered around health and safety. And I think the amount of information we were continuously sharing and the surveys we were using to collaborate with families helped keep the numbers of concerns down. This past school year, we were able to finish updating school marquees so all schools could quickly display multiple messages designed to help keep the community informed. We don't have any more of the marquees where the custodian or someone from the front office has to go out there and punch the letters up there, one message on each side. An increase in quality and quantity of graphics was noted. And as we continue to brand the district, and we will continue to look for additional opportunities to communicate with our stakeholders. I have also included a chart of approved communication tools to support staff as they work to model excellent communication and customer service skills. I wanted to just see all of the things that we use to try to get information out. Any questions?
Any questions, comments?
I just have one. When you get, do you regularly go in and look at Facebook if that's your primary and do you ever do some kind of review of general comments about schools or what they see in schools or what they look like? Because you'll be surprised what people write on Facebook. I don't have it, but people read it to me. Oh my goodness gracious. And And what they talk about, well, there's probably no relevant to it. People really read those things. And sometimes that's how you pick a school, by your Facebook friends. I don't know why, but do you monitor it and do some communication piece, or how do you group it?
It is a huge thing to be watching, both for school and,
Yeah.
because we want to be a school of choice and an employer of choice.
That's
So we
right. Oh,
do-
very good
yes.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do monitor multiple modalities. And depending on what they're saying and what kind of traction it's getting, we don't typically have to respond.
Mm.
And what we have found on some of the more inflammatory pieces
Yeah.
is that our community comes to our rescue. We don't have to say
So
anything.
you are monitoring
Yeah.
and watching it, because sometimes when you read it, it's really bad, and that's just maybe an angry person, who knows?
Yeah.
But, okay, good.
We see way more positive than negative. Thank you.
I don't know, just a comment. I don't know whether it's the schools, the parents, or whatever. On my other job, I deal with 18 to 30-year-olds, and they do not respond to emails. They do respond to texts on occasion. I send them out in a list. I can send out 45 at a time, and I'll get 3 back. When I do emails, I probably never get anybody back. I have a nice little Facebook page for the whatever we put, and I put in their announcements that you can go to this address, and there'll be a group of people, young people there. And of the 300 that are on there for the members for that particular one, there's about 5 that consistently look at it. So again, I don't know if it's just the time and season in which we're in the world, but we've just got to continually find a way to get to parents.
That's exactly the reason we use so many tools.
It's just a new route. I was going to ask too, on some of these things that we've learned on virtual learning. I don't know if we're going to comment about it, but those kids who are sick and don't have an opportunity to come, are we still giving them an opportunity to virtually participate and count their attendance?
President Nielsen, yes, we are.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other comments on questions on that one?
I would add, I was just at a workshop yesterday. And if you went to the school board's law conference, there was a consultant there on communication. And part of what we're learning is, there is an organized interest in demeaning and discrediting the public school system because there's so much profit to be made in alternatives. And so they're doing a lot of things which are provocative to get a rise out of people. And you're seeing that in a lot of other social issues and things that are stirring up communities coming before school boards and those kind of things. And so one of the challenges, of course, is they don't have to act with any integrity. In fact, sometimes they intentionally don't. And the idea is kind of the ends justifies the means. If they get what they want, it doesn't matter what they did. I'm not characterizing our parents that way or our community that way, but the lesson that's been delivered from the communication experts to us is not to react or get in an argument with anybody on social media, but to continue to post our message in our way and just to be present in that space with what's important to us. Because as soon as you engage them, you get drawn into that and you're actually repeating on social media whatever the statement problem was. And those things which get repeated get moved to the top of the pay attention to this metric, the drama. And so while we're monitoring it, we're being very careful. As much as we might want to be defensive and set the record straight, and I think of course, it's hard to know how effective or ineffective that messaging is, but I think it's the wiser course of action often. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to chapter 8.
President Nielsen, members of the board, Chapter 8 deals with attracting, developing, and retaining a highly qualified and competent staff. In March of 2020, COVID-19 came and wreaked havoc on our traditional recruiting efforts. But since then, we've been very creative and had some positive results in both recruitment and retention. As you can see from the retention rate chart, we had 94% of our staff returning this past year. Multiple incentives were used to retain employees, and our contract signing incentive continued to entice staff to sign contracts early. I'm sure in no small part, thanks to the governing board, the ESSER $1,000 returning incentive for all staff was greatly appreciated and was certainly a factor in raising the retention rate, but had the largest impact on support staff, increasing their return percentage to nearly 100%. Despite the change in recruiting strategies, we were able to increase our appropriately certified teacher percentage to 96%. You might remember back in the old days, this was the highly qualified, and after NCLB went away, it's appropriately certified. So that was mark of achievement for us, certainly. Despite the fact that we were grounded last year, we did use social media and online job posting boards. As you can see from the recruiting incentive, we had 28 moving incentives, which means we were able to attract 28 people from out of state, even with no in-person fairs. So we're definitely looking into increasing and broadening that piece of our recruiting efforts. The perceiver data reflected positive perceptions about the district, with 83% of teachers viewing Littleton as a highly regarded place to work. And this was an increase for the 7th year in a row. There was a very, very low point a few years ago where it was only 15%. So another really great thing to say about the work of the district. Parents expressed satisfaction with their child's teacher, 91%, and 94% of students agreed that the adults in their school were helpful. And this was another all-time high, despite the online learning environment. The number of teachers who reported that they look forward to coming to school every day increased to 92%. So I'm not really sure if that's looking forward to coming to school on the computer and or in person, but that it was very high. High agreement may be attributed to ongoing district attempts to show employees, students, and the community that we are leaders in caring. So COVID played a part in changing the attitudes and perceptions of everyone. And I think that that is shown in the data from this chapter. So I'd be happy to answer questions that you may have on chapter 8.
Any questions, member of the board? John, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Just following up real quickly on your or the district's overall recruiting strategy. So you noted here, and the data kind of backs that up, that you guys were just as effective online as maybe when you were traveling a lot. Is the plan to continue that, or do we think we're going back on the road?
So there's a couple of things in the works. When we closed in March of 2020, we had several trips planned. So we have a plethora of flight credits left over for actually Miss Chizzy and myself. And so we would like to still recruit from Ohio and Iowa, which are the only 2 states that have a surplus of elementary educators in the state. But other than that, we're looking to spend our recruiting budget on online platforms, which we were successful in. And there are some that are a little more expensive, but we're going to choose to put that money towards online because we think that we will have a better outcome. In addition to that, it's not just new teachers that we get that way. So we're not having a lower teacher experience. We can get seasoned teachers that are tired of Montana and want to come. So,
Well,
and we can text them. Yes.
I think the other thing was that a lot of those fairs got canceled. So, they weren't convening and, we weren't attending. We were on equal footing with everybody else trying to, if the fairs come back, we'll have to consider, is it worth attendance? But when they canceled all the the recruiting fairs, then all of us were kind of in the same boat as to how we would approach recruiting. If it's a blend of some in person and some not in person, it'll be constantly us trying to adapt to whatever that delivery market is. Which,
No, I think that was
Yeah.
an important
Yeah.
context. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate those comments.
Okay, moving on to chapter 9. This is employees working in a collaborative manner to provide quality education experience. Schools continue to collaborate through the PLC process. We also monitored the effectiveness of our teachers, as Ms. Vandewater commented in earlier chapters. We did evaluations, even though the mandate was suspended due to COVID-19 by the legislature. We did instructional rounds and walkthroughs, but they were modified due to the delivery method of instruction being mostly online. Teachers participated in many district committees and leadership opportunities that fostered teacher empowerment. And the table in this chapter, although kind of hard to read, and we can get that to you, included some of the committees that teachers participated in to help with communication, help with student achievement. We helped with social emotional supports and things like that. As a result of all of this work, teachers agreed, 87% of them, that they collaborate to resolve issues and obstacles to the learning students receive. This is important because students and teachers worked diligently to adapt to a new teaching and learning environment. Perceiver data reported 95% of students agreed that their teacher works well with other teachers, very high. As you can see, issues were still taken to faculty advisory committees from teachers with their staff. That is the graph. If we could, yep, that one right there. This could, the committee, the numbers for the committees were significantly lower over the last 2 years with COVID. This is probably due to changes in perceptions of what's truly important during the stress of the pandemic is what I would say about that. Positive results may be attributed to factors such as grade level teachers sharing common planning to discuss best practices, unpacking standards, using data to inform instruction, or talking to each other about problems and solving them collectively. Now, the interesting thing on this, positivity dropped to 77%, that parents felt their child's teacher was sensitive to cultural and ethnic issues. But only 2.8% disagreed with us, meaning that a lot of people didn't answer that question. But in comparison, in a different section, 84% of parents felt that their child was treated with respect, which was one of the highest numbers we've seen in 5 years. So I think that that's a reflection of the highly charged political climate or sensitivity to buzzwords, which Dr. Freeman shared with us today, about using words that are politically charged that he saw a speaker at the conference. So with that being said, are there any questions about chapter 9?
Questions, comments? I do have one comment. I think I spend too much time driving up and down Avondale and that beautiful sign up there. You have achieving, you have advancing, you have collaborative. Could we maybe change that to collaborating? So it's a nice future tense if it's on the board.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
Sure.
Sorry. I mean, all of those words are exciting because it's ing. Sorry. I did see one up there today about ASCAR.
Yes.
That was nice.
There are quite a few partners contacting us, asking.
Yeah, what we have done so far, as long as it's consistent with the mission of the district and their partners, then we're partnering. And we do consider the city a partner. We have not talked about selling anything yet. And before we do, we come back to you guys, and you might, be thinking about, but I asked the team to do some market research on what people actually charge for space like that. And then, of course, it'd have to be limited to safe for kids and that kind of thing if we did it. But right now, we're just doing partners, and it's been great.
Sure. Thank you. If there's nothing on that one, let's move ahead to the chapter 10.
Mr. President, Governing Board, Chapter 10 looks at the goals and strategies around how we share resources across the community. As we were just discussing, several agencies use district facilities this past year. HOAs, churches, and sports programs are a few examples of organizations who use library spaces, fields, conference rooms, and cafeterias. Highlighted partnerships for the 2021 school year included the Boys and Girls Club and the Catholic Charities Community Services. As you are well aware, the club is housed right here at the district office campus and continue to operate most of the time throughout the pandemic. They help support our kids' social, emotional, and academic success. Westside Head Start expanded to our district and meant 59 additional children aged 3 to 5 had access to a program designed to assist parents with getting our youngest learners ready for kindergarten. Our superintendent continued to advocate for public education in the West Valley and the state. He frequently attended community events and advocated for issues surrounding public education. Working alongside business, workforce, and education associations, legislative committees, he provided regular contact with members of the legislative district in which Littleton families reside. He offered his perspectives, he'll give his opinions, and he will speak on the behalf of the kids. The perceiver data showed an increase in agreement from teachers that they know where to find information to help support the community. Teachers also reported an increase in agreement that parents were responsive to requests from staff. Although there were so many people involved in feeding the community, on my data page here, the first picture you see, I'd like to give a special shout out to Southwest Food Services and our transportation department for teaming up and taking food out in the community in an amazing show of leaders in caring. The first picture I placed on the highlights page shows students with backpacks ready as a driver hands out meal packs. The table of district facilities shows revenue generated by allowing organizations to use our facilities over the last 3 years. During the 2021 school year, it was churches and youth sports groups mostly that were making those payments. A new Leaf Vita partnership was provided in the last 2 years since I've last reported to you. And I thought this was just an interesting thing to report to you. It shows quite a few performance stats, and this is their chart that I borrowed from them, but I'd like to point out just a few things. Volunteers worked in our Family Welcome Center and provided free tax preparation services, and they came only on Thursdays during tax season. Our first year, 65 electronic files were accepted. Last year, during the pandemic, the participation numbers nearly quadrupled, where 253 taxes were filed. And we are so proud that this program helped members of our community receive returns of over $623,000. And it works right here, right out of the Family Welcome Center on Thursday nights. Lastly, I would like to point out that the Littleton Education Foundation continued to support our staff and students in a variety of ways, including hosting an online trivia contest to raise funds during a time when we decided it was best not to come together. So they still supported our students and staff. Any questions on this information?
Thank you. No, I just happened to participate in the Vita program recognition gala, whatever it was last year, and they were really excited about what was done here. We just need to continue to get that as well as all the other things out here. Amy, are you still with us there? You got any comments or questions? I kind of missed over you.
I'm here. I'm listening in. No comments or questions.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to number 11.
Chapter 11, of course, this one is still about a meaningful, involved community, and strategies were used throughout the year to foster two-way communication. Considering the district communicates across several generations, and we spent so much time in dynamic distance learning, information was disseminated through a variety of media, which we've already covered. The perceiver data shows an increase in agreement from staff and parents that they're being informed on programs and initiative. There was a significant drop in students reporting that They hear good things people in school are doing, which had me wondering if the wording of the question influenced that drop, because a kid's definition of in our school might have been challenged last year. So the increase in agreement that stakeholders are informed was most likely influenced by the laser focus on communication. During the pandemic, there was a lot of conflicting information and the news was continuously flooding every outlet. COVID was dominating the headlines and naturally our families wanted answers. Littleton ESD worked to not only publish, send, and or post information, but to send surveys and ask for comment on the important things that were happening, especially changes in instruction, community resources, school and family issues, mitigation, safety, and well-being were huge on the minds of everyone last year. The use of mobile apps increased as administrators and parents downloaded district resources and tools to access information on the go. Of course, that's when we made the change to board meetings were held virtually, live streamed, and recorded. Instruction was delivered mostly through Google Classroom and meetings were held via Zoom or Teams. The Littleton community had to quickly learn how to provide instruction online while keeping families and teachers not only up and running, but engaged. Websites and social media platforms were continuously updated, graphic standards were utilized, and websites were updated. In 2021, school mascots were updated to be more relevant and focus on the times. The pandemic brought out the very best in some people, and Littleton ESD saw many examples of activities that nurtured a strong sense of community. Staff shared parade routes and drove around the community, recorded and posted themselves reading, created amazing videos to remind students just how much they miss them, solicited pictures, delivered meals, held virtual spirit days, virtual art shows, and even virtual athletic challenges, just to name a few. During last year, we saw numerous examples of how we were leaders in caring. Please allow me to share the few artifacts on page 2 here. The first picture is the newest mascot added to the Collier Business Academy. The request came in to have a female coyote who looked ready for the business world. We had fun collaborating with the leadership cadre at Collier, and what you see on this page is a powerful coyote dressed for success. At the start of the classroom closure, I already spoke about this, parade started happening, and so I put a picture there so you could see, you could almost not even have a dry eye when you were looking at things on Facebook that were happening and the things that our teachers and leaders, staff were doing. Community stakeholders meetings continued, and I listed the district levels committees that met virtually. Of course, school leaders were doing the same with site level decision makers. What we did learn is that we saw some new faces virtually, which means continuing to offer hybrid meetings in the future may allow us to increase participation and membership. So we're thinking that even when we can come together, we might offer some hybrid alternatives so that people can tune in from wherever they are. On this next chart, we have compiled the parent ratings of school quality. When parents were asked to rate school quality, we saw decreases in parents giving A's and B's when it came to the quality of education, the school district, and all public schools. Although it is typical for parents to rate their own school higher than public schools in general, our parents continued to rate us higher than what we see on national ratings. For example, last year, Gallup reported that 50% of parents said they were satisfied with K-12 education. Nearly 85% of our parents rated their school as an A or B, and almost 84% gave the district an A or B. According to the U.S., this is interesting too, according to the U.S. Department of Education, National Center for Educational Statistics, only about 57% of parents are satisfied with public schools. So if you compare that to the national stats, we're doing much better. In conclusion, the district will continue to maintain vital partnerships throughout the community. Collaboration was not only valuable for Littleton ESD, but the two-way communication was critical to our success last year. Questions?
So I just have a question on the parent ratings right there. How is that collected? Is that like a Survey Monkey? Is that,
Yes. Yes,
so that goes out to
Annual.
all the parents, and then
Yes.
those that respond back
correct.
are the ones that you've got tallied up here. Do you have any idea what percentage of parents or school or whatever responded back?
I do. Last year, we saw 715 or 714 responses, which is a little less than half the year before. The year before, we saw 1,686. I don't have that memorized. I have a sheet right here.
Okay, thank you. That's, just want to see the participation there. If there's no comments or questions on that part, let's move to chapter 12.
Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As you can see on the first page, we rewrote the strategies, narrowed that down to 3. So accepting leadership roles, leadership at all levels being constructive, and evaluation and data systems used to monitor core values. And those are the belief statements that we have about the way people should interact with each other. So we collected data on all of those. One of the things that's important in the leadership chapter is some of the changes that have happened in leadership, both at the governing board and at the executive team level, as well as in other levels. And we do think that sometimes changes in leadership do impact the culture and the performance of the school district. Of course, we hold numerous meetings with different leadership teams throughout the year. Those are familiar to you. They're characterized in one setting as collaborative because we do problem solving and solution generating there, but they're also considered professional development opportunities. And certainly leadership development is an important focus of the school management team. So there was a little bit of interesting data in our perceiver data, and that was that about 86% and 93% of parents respectively over 4 years encourage us to work together toward common goals. They agreed that we continue to behave that way. Student disagreement dropped a couple percent, and we asked that question. Adults encourage us to work together toward common goals to all of those groups. Teacher agreement increased to just over 93% for adults working together. So we were happy to see that upward trend in a challenging year for everybody to collaborate online. Or in school with masks on and all of those things that were happening. You know that we had 6 focus schools to start out our academies, and we've added the Collier Elementary School to be a business and financial literacy academy. So the board took that action last year, and they're doing a great job of adding opportunities for their students to develop that. And I think the community is excited from the feedback we've seen that we're providing that opportunity in the school district. We have a lot of organizations outside of the school district that our leadership team participates in. And this would have been a kind of a multiple page run-oning table if we put every office everybody had with every organization that's out there. So what we've done is listed the organizations that Littleton leaders are participating in, and then who those participants are. And that streamlines this table a little bit, but we have numerous people who not only are members of, but serve as officers of or run other committees of these organizations. It helps them in developing their leadership, but it also helps the school district in collaborating with and being aware of issues in other school districts, things that are coming down from state agencies, including the state board of education, the facilities board, and those kind of things. So we find that engagement and leadership both helps our staff grow and also helps keep our district informed. One of the tools that we use to develop leadership is a matrix, and there's an example in the graphs. Looks like a radial graph. It has 12 dimensions. And you can see from this graph that there's 4 blue dimensions, 4 green dimensions, and 4 red dimensions. This scale, which you probably can't read because the print's so small, but from bottom to top is security needs and actualization needs. satisfaction needs. And then from left to right, on the right, it starts out with humanistic emphasis, and on the left, task emphasis. So we cross tab those two scales from being humanistic to task oriented, and from having security needs to satisfaction needs, which develops a leadership matrix. Everybody who comes to work for Littleton does a self-assessment, and they get results on this scale. Then we do a culture assessment, which is the leadership team, and it creates a group report. And then we do a 360-degree report called Leadership Impact, and staff will be taking part of that in this year. So the year we're reporting, 2021, we did the culture inventory of the leadership team, and these are the results. What we hope to see is high ratings in the blue categories and low ratings in the green and red categories. In the data that we collected last spring, kind of as we were finishing with remote learning and moving into more in-person options, and you might remember that only about 40% of our families elected to come back to in-person learning. So the ratings for the executive team and the assistant principals were higher in the blue or constructive areas. Directors and deans were higher in the passive or green areas, and principals showed both blue and green around the 50th percentile. What we like to see is the blue up around the 75th percentile. And if you can see the increments of those rings, they're not equal because they're in percentiles, but the first is 10 and then 25. The dark line that's midway is the 50th percentile, and then 75th and 90th. So there is one category in humanistic and encouraging where district leaders rated the culture of the district close to the 90th percentile. The lowest one was in the red area in power, which was just over 10 percentile. And that's a good rating for what we would consider to be it's a aggressive defensive style. It's as it's labeled there. The top styles are considered constructive, and that's where we get constructive leadership as a goal for the district. The other graph that you see here is the aggregate by standard of the board's self-assessment of their ratings on the two self-assessments that you've done. So what we've done is taken the 5 categories or the 5 standards and compared 2021 and 2019. And so each standard is reported in a pair, 21 on top and 19 on the bottom. And you can see that if you put together the always and mostly graphs, that they grew in each of those standards from 6% in structure to 25% in conduct and ethics, or an average of about 12.8%. We also did a 5-point power rating for those standards to see what that growth might be. The average growth was 0.52. The shift was from 3.87 to 4.39 in the power rating. There was the greatest improvement for both vision and accountability, and vision showed the greater increase in always and mostly. The most growth in power came again from the improvement in conduct and ethics in the board self-rating. And there are other measures underneath those 5 standards, which we could bring back to the board to discuss more fully at another study session. And those are the highlights. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions members might have or clarify.
Any comments or questions? None, Dr. Freeman. Let's go to the next one, 13.
Thank you, President Nielsen, members of the governing board. I'm sure you were wondering when you were going to hear from me this evening. Chapter 13 of the monitoring report is part of Principle 6, highly effective organization, and specifically aligning people and programs to match the needs and resources of our growing organization. The management team used 5 strategies to interpret this goal, and these strategies are listed on the first half of the first page of chapter 13. District planning continued in the 21 school year to align resources through implementing and enhancing innovative programs such as school focus and school choice, like the rest of the executive team mentioned tonight, as well as continuing the one-to-one student device program. New programs during the 21 school year included dynamic distance learning, allowing students synchronous and asynchronous learning, and curbside and bus delivery meals while the district was physically closed during the pandemic. Perceiver data that was collected from parents and teachers showed that 91% of teachers in the district highly agreed of having adequate materials and resources to perform their job. This was a 5% increase from the prior year and a significant increase from the 60% reported in 2017. Parent approval for school management continued to be strong in fiscal year 21, with 87% of the parents surveyed in strong agreement. Table 2 shows the budget balance carry forward of levy funds by fiscal year. You'll notice a couple of things here, that the district carried forward one in fiscal year 21, approximately $2.5 million in both M&O and capital funds. This was due to many reasons. So if you look at the levy fund chart, in the middle of this chart, the state legislature changed the way that school districts can carry over funds, or how they fund the school district system, from a prior year system to a current year system. The prior year system allowed schools to budget on the 100th day of the prior year, allowing consistent budgeting. Current year program forces school districts to guess what their ADM is going to be, budget there, and then adjust during the fiscal year. This requires districts to be a little bit more conservative in their budgeting process. 2021 also saw the development of many COVID-related or COVID relief funds at the state and federal level. These funds do not, these grants have grant end dates, meaning the district was required to use them by the end of the fiscal year. The district was able to take many of the expenses from our levy funds and move them into the grant funds, allowing for us to carry more levy funds into the new fiscal year. With the district being physically closed during much of the school year, there was sizable savings in supplies, gasoline, repairs and maintenance, and similar items that we just didn't have to buy because we weren't transporting kids or printing on print copy paper. The savings from that year, from FY21, can now be brought into the new fiscal year as budget balance carry forward as well. The major unforeseen events in 2021 was the COVID-19 pandemic and the per pupil funding implications that came with that. We talked about this briefly over a couple of presentations that we had, but the district saw budget reductions in fiscal year 21 due to how the Department of Education classified distance learning students. The district was able to utilize federal COVID-19 relief funds as well as budget balance carry forward from the prior year to absorb those reductions. Chart 1 that you'll see on the next page shows the board the historical enrollment and membership of the district since 2017. Littleton experienced an enrollment decline of 10% in 2021, while the state of Arizona experienced 4% reduction in the same time frame. The district's goal is to prioritize expenses in a way to allow for the most money possible to impact the classroom. Chart 2 is a chart that we receive information from annually from the Auditor General's office. What that does is it provides us information that shows us how much the district is spent in certain categories: instruction, instructional support, student support, plant operations, administration, and food service. The district spent 2.1% more on instruction than peer districts, as determined by the Auditor General, with total classroom spending being 69.6% of every dollar the district receives in revenue. This was accomplished by ensuring alignment between school, district, community, and state goals. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board has on Chapter 13.
Any questions? All right. Thank you so much for that one. Number 14.
So chapter 14, we get to wrap up with recognizing people and programs for their excellence. So during COVID, we remained dedicated to supporting our recognition programs to improve staff morale, which seems even more important than it did before, and highlight the value of employees, students, and governing board members. So the cheer committee, along with school committees, look for unique ways to continually boost morale more frequently than waiting for a big end of the year celebration, which ended up being canceled in 2020. So we continue to be creative. And this past year in May, we ended up doing 2 years worth of annual recognition at the end. We wrapped both years into one, and executive team members, along with the governing board, videotaped awards, and campuses gathered to celebrate together in small groups rather than one big one. So we highlighted staff accomplishments. You can see our employee recognition chart in the tables. Several of those are the end of the year recognition, but schools also support several employee recognition, like employee of the month, support staff member of the month, and a lot of that is highlighted on Facebook. We also highlight staff in biweekly bulletins and other district publications. And also staff members were acknowledged through awards. I think it's important to note that the district was recognized for the 13th year in a row for winning our financial reporting award. We had a large number of employees recognized for their years of service. So we returned to a large number of people in the 5 to 10 year category. But interestingly, we had the largest number of people in a very long time in the 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35 year category. They were smattered out, but those are huge accomplishments for people who have remained in the district for that long. So it was kind of an honor for me to do that part of the videotape last year. Campuses also had the opportunity to showcase their work and their students at governing board meetings, although the formatting changed from in-person to pre-recorded presentations. We still recognize student achievement at school assemblies, school site publications, and district publications. And we still continued to acknowledge and recognize volunteers for their dedication to the schools. We've been seeing those videos continue. Students participated in regional competitions in non-traditional formats, and every effort was made to keep recognitions and celebrations as normal as possible, while gathering together continued to be a challenge. If we have any questions to wrap up the chapter 14 and the end of our monitoring report, I'll be happy to answer those for you.
Any final questions, comments?
And I will kick it to Dr. Freeman.
Thank you very much for the review and for all the time and effort put in there to present that to us. Somebody put-
Well, and we do appreciate the feedback because we know, I mean, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup on this, you know, before it becomes a finished publication, and probably do some refinements. And I think all of the staff have made notes about member comments and things that might be more useful or less useful. But I think to kind of keep along this line, and then I think like President Nielsen asked about, it wasn't Illuminate, but it was, I made a note of the kind of data. Yeah, it was Illuminate data, that we can bring that back at another time, or anything else that needs clarification. I don't know if we can have it ready for you by the November meeting, but we might be able to, while it's fresh on your mind,
Okay.
to bring it back in that fashion. And some of the step 4 data we might have be able to easily compile as well. So we'll work on that and appreciate the insights. As you can imagine, we get very familiar with working with this. The teacher evaluation instrument is used both for professional development, for developmental feedback, and for summative feedback at the end of the year. And part of the reason we like doing that is there's no sneaking up on you and what you're going to be rated on. You're highly familiar with it, over time through the course of the school year. So when it comes time to really do that rating, it's not going to be the first time you've heard about what any of those indicators are. And so we really appreciate that. That brings, unless there's any other broad or global feedback on the format of the report, then we can go on to the final item. You want to check with Amy? Amy, are you good? I mean, Ms. Selznick.
I am good. Thank you for asking.
All right, let's go on to
All
item
right.
number
then,
7.
Then we want to update the board and the committee who are listening on what's happening with our COVID metrics. And this is from the data presented by the state and the county as of last Thursday. And so part of our concern is the data is already aged a little bit before it's reported. And now it's been several days since that report. The thing that concerns us the most, if you can zoom in on that graph a little bit, is the upward trend of positivity that's happened for 3 reports in a row. Now you can see that it's at about 24. I think it was 23 point something. The last time we peaked at 27 is on the left side of the graph, and the 23-24 is on the right side. As a frame of reference for the governing board, when the pandemic was at its peak for illnesses, we were only at about 22% positivity. The illness graph you can see arched way up and then came down and was dropping at the time right along the same line as the green line, which is the county data. So our illnesses for Littleton and Maricopa County were running very close. The positivity for the county is that green line on the bottom, and you can see our region has really departed from that. And we were showing last week a long, steady increase in positivity. And today we sent out school outbreak letters to 2 schools. So illnesses are on the increase, and usually what you see is a little lag in the increase in illnesses following the increase in positivity. And so we are also sending a letter home tomorrow to certain impacted classrooms about the possibility of having to change to remote learning for those classes. We're required by the county to consult with them. So we're in the process of consulting with the county health department about how to handle any place where we have multiple cases in the same school in the same grade level. And we'll try to be making some decisions about those expeditiously, as well as if there's going to be any exceptions for students who are vaccinated or have been wearing masks. But the issue clearly to us has been what kids and families have been doing outside of school over fall break and those kind of things that are now manifesting in kids sick at school. So we did have in one school in one grade level 22 kids out, and 11 of those tested positive. So we're really concerned about that. We think that we should continue to work with the county health department to decide if there's any things that we should be doing different with our plan because of outbreaks or because of clusters. The way the plan is written with the county is small groups, clusters, grade levels, or entire schools. So the approach we've taken is to deal with the smallest unit of kids that makes sense with close contact, but we don't control what's happening outside of the school. And right now, the data on illness is not indicating that the spread is happening within the school, because of what the county looks at is the relationship of cases and where the illnesses may have originated depending on the reporting. So in some cases, there's a child reporting positive, but so is the whole family. And so we're depending a lot on their contact tracing for that. Our thinking is that we don't need to change our mitigation plan. We just need to follow the direction of the county health department. And so we're not really asking for the board to make any changes. Probably to stay the course would be our recommendation, but we're happy to hear what you're hearing from the community or any feedback you have along those lines. And of course, we'll bring this item back again at the November 9th meeting, for ongoing consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Any questions, comments? Stay the course. There's no other comments or questions. Item number 8. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
This is Kathy. I'll make a motion for adjournment at 8:06.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I heard any opposed? Thank you so much. We appreciate you all being here this evening. Bye-bye.